Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. Today's episode is jam packed with leadership lessons because we're joined by Keith McCoy, a nurse director with over 30 years of experience in the healthcare industry. Keith is the author of the upcoming leadership book, Just Do Good, which explores powerful leadership insights through the lens of films. In the book, Keith introduces his Significant 60, a collection of movies that reflect the most important traits and lessons in leadership. And today, we're going to be deep diving in those lessons. I'm honored to have you on the show and deep dive on your book. So, Keith, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to catch up with new people. Nice to have come into contact with you recently, and I'm happy to discuss the book that I've written. That's coming out in the middle of July. Just Do Good, and great to join you on the podcast, Sid. Thank you.
So, let's start. If you could give us a little more insights into your personal life and corporate journey so our listeners can get to know you a little bit more.
So I grew up in Ireland. I lived for 18 years in Ireland. I grew up on a farm, um, which is very different to the life I lead now. Um, but back then, it was obviously it was normal, and most of the people I went to school with were the sons and daughters of farmers. So that was interesting and fun. Um, and I moved to London when I was 18, and I trained as a mental health nurse. And over the years, I've had the good fortune to have worked in most parts or areas of mental health, from intensive care to low secure, medium secure, a little stint in high secure, working in eating disorders, addictions, etc., etc. And I suppose over the years, I've learned a lot, uh, especially as I moved into um, management and leadership posts where I had responsibility for people and systems. And I reflect back on different lessons I learned. I played an awful lot of sport at different stages in my life, Gaelic football and rugby, and I learned an awful lot from those things. And I've brought the lessons I learned from sport into my leadership and managerial work. So yeah, we might fall into this during the conversation. Let's see.
Yeah, 100%. And what really inspired you to write this book, by the way? Quite unique as well, unique concept.
So I suppose what it is I grew up in the 80s. I'm a little bit older than you said. I I grew up in the 80s, and I was really I mean, people can Google some of these things if they're younger than me, or if they're unaware of some of these things. And I Live Aid. So Live Aid was this amazing concept that was put together by the pop and rock stars of that time, many of whom are still alive today. And it was on in the summer of '85, July '85, actually. And basically, it was the rock stars put together a concert. Part of the concert was at Wembley, London, and the other was in a stadium in Philadelphia, USA. And they were just raising money to help with famine and poverty type conditions that were in Africa. So that had a very positive effect on me. And then I saw Gorbachev in in the old Soviet Union, USSR, and how he was doing things like glasnost and perestroika to bring about more transparency to politics in the USSR and try and modernize their economy. And then that also coincided with a huge drive around nuclear disarmament and the fall of the Berlin Wall. And I just thought that the world is moving in a very positive trajectory. And I think that I felt that pretty much through the 90s and the noughties. But there's somewhere over the last 10 years or so, maybe a little bit more, where I think the world has kind of got a little bit lost again. And it's no longer moving in that positive trajectory. And that kind of got me got me thinking, and it got me writing, and that got me thinking about leadership concepts. I kind of encountered them in my career. I encountered them while I was doing different academic studies, and then I just thought, I've read an awful lot about these things. I've got some ideas myself. Let's put them out there in a book. And then I just thought, well, a lot of the academics talk about a whole range of things that leadership is about. And I just thought, well, let me bring it to life in a different way, in a way that people might be able to engage with in a way that's more enjoyable than picking up and reading an academic article. So I started showing them these lessons of leadership, all of the things that you'll find in the academic books, but just through the lens of films. And people love films and they understand films and they engage with them. So I'm just trying to help people engage with these ideas in that way. And I suppose what I'm about really is this whole concept that we all have power, but what we've got mostly got power over is how we behave. And what the book is really about is trying to show people about how they can behave better, how they can do good, and that if we're all focused on doing good and being better, that translates into us doing better in our own lives, doing better in our working lives as leaders within organizations, and then it can kind of go up to a country level in terms of how the leaders of countries can actually do a better job too. And those are the types of things that have driven me to write it.
Amazing. And with doing good, there's also a lot of businesses doing bad. So you did mention a few bits in your book. So why do you think like selfishness, power, greed still dominate some corporate cultures? And how can leaders actively counter them and be good?
I mean, there's a lot of, I suppose, turning that on its head ever so slightly. So there's a lot to be positive about too. There's a lot of great leaders. There's a lot of great people that work in companies. So there's some people get lost, but they get lost in their lives and in the real world too. It's not just in companies. So I think what happens is the Dalai Lama talks about it, that it's okay to have self-interest, and that without self-interest, you'll just fail to exist. So self-interest is important, but I think where people go wrong is they don't notice that there is a fine line that sits between self-interest and selfishness. And sometimes they step into that area of selfishness without understanding it. And then that brings them into the area of greed. And greed throughout history, the history books are full of people that were just obsessed and drunk on greed and power. And that continues into modern day. So I think part of the reason is people can't see that line between self-interest and selfishness, and they get stuck. And then once they're stuck in that area of selfishness and greed, they can't get out of it. I think what happens in companies is that there's a chap, I think his name was John Ellington, but he wrote a book a number of years ago, and it was about the triple P's: profit, planet, people. And I think what happens sometimes in organizations, there's two things that happen. One, they just zone in on the profit and they forget about the planet, and they forget about the people. And so it's about the corporate objectives perhaps aren't always the right objectives. So if you haven't got the organization focused on the triple P, if they're only focused on profit, then that's what they're going to be putting their energy and their thinking and their time into. So it's about the organization needs to have the country needs to have the right purpose, society needs to have the right purpose, or raison d'etre. And it's okay to be having some focus on money and profitability. That's fine. I don't have an issue with that at all. But we just need to make sure that we're also zoning in on the planet and zoning in on people. I think if we do that, we've got a chance of surviving as a species. We've got a chance of making sure that our organizations deliver in a whole variety of ways. But I guess one of the other things where organizations go wrong is perhaps sometimes that over time they've recruited and promoted a particular type of individual. And it might be that this individual is a brilliant type of go-getter that is massively zoned in on just making money. And it might be that what we need is more less of this homogenous that type of person, and more of other types of people that will also help us achieve other objectives that aren't just about money. But also, I suppose in saying that, some of these individuals that are very profit orientated, I suppose it comes back to if the organization is set at a target of, it's not just about the profit, that it's about those other pieces as well, that those individuals that seem to really aspire to do great with the profit, they might develop the aspirations to do quite well with those other things too and make it happen. So I think it can happen, but we just need to very quickly, at a country level, at a company level, at a personal level, think more about what we're doing for people, what we're doing for the planet, as well as what we're doing to generate money in terms of profit.
Quite interesting, and it just reminded me something. And we both went to Durham University, and we had a lecture about corporate social responsibility, where our lecturer mentioned like there's a book called "The Business School Should Be Shut Down," because all the managers, directors have been taught it at university that profit first mentality. What's your perspective on this? Do you think like universities are to be blamed because they might be teaching profit first mentality?
I I'm not in the habit of blaming. I so what I would look at it is, I would say, well, we need to diagnose what's the problem, and then kind of work out what the solution is. And if universities or if companies have been focused in the wrong way, then it's about how do we get them to repurpose, how we get them to refocus, how we get them to learn from perhaps some of the things that, it's about learning as organizations, as people, as countries, as the world evolves. We need to be learning, and I think we just need to make sure that we're using whatever we can to make sure that there's a catalyst in place, that the learning is speeded up and it's expedited as fastly as we possibly can, so that we're not kind of living too much with the errors of our past lives, and that we're kind of zoning in on how we can kind of make a difference today.
Right, makes sense. And in order to learn, you have also come up with an interesting framework. So, could you explain what is the Rise Up framework and how can leaders apply it?
So the Rise Up framework is something that I developed.
Yeah,
I kind of had a little bit. You mentioned Durham there for a second. I've
yeah.
been I've been to City University and North Middlesex University too, but I went to Durham and I did an MBA there, and I really enjoyed it. And when I was there, that got me thinking of certain management and leadership theories. But then I had a particular job where I was hired to try and help some of the hospitals that might have needed to make some improvements and kind of work out how best to help them improve. And as part of that improvement drive, I used to meet lots of people quite regularly. And it's in the book that I used to ask them certain questions. And from those questions, I developed a framework that was called the Rise Up Framework. And when I was talking to people, I was able to work out that the problems that they were describing all fitted under six areas. And that if we were to put some effort into these six areas, that we would actually improve the organizations, make things better for the people. And through that, then you're improving your profit, you're improving stuff for your planet, you're improving stuff for your people. So Rise Up focuses in on six different headings: raison d'etre, independence, stimulation, expertise, unite, and process fixing. And basically, what it's saying is that um, everybody within an organization needs a raison d'etre in terms of what is it that you're about, what gets you up in the morning, what is it that connects you to, what is your North Star. And if they're able to figure that out, they'll be happy in the job. So it's making sure that people are aligned, that if they're in a particular industry, that they understand what their raison d'etre is for being there. And if they can't find a raison d'etre that aligns with that industry, then they need to take themselves off to a different industry that they're going to be happier in. And that's kind of raison d'etre, and it's very powerful from a motivation perspective. Independence is about people want to have a say. They want to be listened to. They want to have a say, and they want to feel that they're contributing to their organization in one way or another. Stimulation is about how people feel stimulated in terms of how are you giving them feedback? How are you helping them to grow in their organization? Are you appraising them? Are you giving that opportunity for them to develop? Um, and then expertise. Expertise is about everybody wants to be good at something. And it's about giving people that opportunity, working with them to work out what they're strong at, what they're good at, and as much as you possibly can, helping them to develop some strengths, because nobody goes to work to feel like they're not contributing or that they're not good at their job. So it's about finding that thing that they're really, really good at and helping them to play to that, giving them the opportunity for expertise. The unite component, what that's about, Sid, is it's about there's lots of things that kind of break us apart, whether it's in our organizations or in our families or whatever. And it's about understanding the types of things that stop us from uniting with others. So it's about what's getting in the way of misunderstandings. Do we understand that we kind of live or work in particular silos? Do we understand how you've got different types of personality types? So it's working out all of these things that can be blockages or obstacles for us, kind of connecting and doing well with others, and how you end up helping people to unite. And then the last thing is called process fixing. And what that's about is that within your organization, you need to have some sort of a feedback loop where you're recognizing that things aren't quite right, but you need to have some way of gathering that information and then giving the leadership that opportunity to fix some of those things. Now, it might be that some of these things aren't fixable, but if you're able to demonstrate that you're listening and that you're fixing some things and you're feeding back that some of the other things aren't fixable, but that you're acknowledging that they're not perfect situations, those things again create positivity. So, what you're trying to achieve is rise up. And that rise up within your organization gives you, it's massively motivating, and it gives you an opportunity to get the very, very best out of people, whether that's in your social club or whether it's in your company or whatever. That rise up framework, where I initially created it for organizations and companies, I think that you can also use it in your personal life. And the question you can ask yourself is, have I got a raison d'etre in my life? And of course, if you haven't, then it's about, well, you need to start thinking about how you get one and how to follow through with that. And then, in terms of where independence works for you as an individual, it's about, well, am I listening to myself? Am I really listening to myself? And am I doing the things that I really want to do as a person? Because these are going to help you find true happiness. And in terms of the stimulate and how that works for an individual, it's about, am I being kind to myself? Am I having a supportive internal dialogue? Because, a lot of the times we're kind of talking to ourselves in our heads, and is that
Yeah.
dialogue supportive, or am I telling myself about the good things about me? So it gives that opportunity for people to do that. Then it's about expertise for an individual. Am I thinking about my strengths? Do I know what my strengths are? Am I developing my strengths? Am I playing to my strengths? So you can see how those things, if you're doing stuff around that in your own personal life, you as an individual, how you have that opportunity to really kind of find positivity and happiness. The unite bit is about, for you as an individual, it's how are you engaging with those around you in a positive way? Are you being kind to others? Are you playing a part in making those relationships that you're in honest and meaningful and supportive? And if you're not, well, then do something about it. And then the process fixing bit for us individually within our lives is, are there things in my life I'm not happy about? Am I identifying these? Am I trying to understand them? Am I trying to find solutions to these things that I'm not happy about in my life? And the goal here isn't actually to fix everything that's wrong in your life. It's to be compassionate with yourself. It's to listen to yourself. It's to acknowledge that there's issues, that you're going to try and find solutions. And where these solutions can't be found, and this is really, really important, Sid, where these solutions can't be found, it's about accepting that you've tried your best and accepting the situation. And I think that that's where happiness for us as individuals exists. And I think if you apply rise up to yourself as an individual, you're going to be much happier in your life. You're going to bring more happiness to those around you. But then probably as an individual, you're going to do a lot of good in your company. So that rise up framework, it's very useful for you as a person, but it's also very useful for organizations in terms of how they can analyze themselves as an organization and figure out how best to lead their organization.
Wow, I love that answer, Keith. You also explain how can organizations apply it in their roles, or leaders can apply in their role, and also how we can apply as individuals. And you also mentioned about strengths and weaknesses, and you also have a concept in your book called the Grow Great Teams concept. So can
Yeah.
you share what does that mean, and how can we really apply our strengths and weakness to it?
So I think I I spoke to you earlier. I mean, I was really lucky. I went to a school, and at the school, I just happened to be there at the same time as a range of other people, and we just combined, and we were very, very successful. I think I was on three teams that won rugby championships, and I was on two teams that won Gaelic football championships, and half of the people played on both teams. And what I learned back then, but I didn't quite appreciate it till I was working as a deputy manager when I was around 27 and 28. But what I learned back then was that you needed all of the people that were on the team. And all of the team they all had different strengths, but they all had different weaknesses. And if you were all able to understand your strengths and your weaknesses and combine them in a particular way and come up with a strategy, your competitive strategy, it gives you that opportunity to win. And we did that. And that's kind of a little bit about where the Grow Great Teams starts. But for me, the greatest example, and we should be doing this in all of our organizations, is that you need people to identify their strengths. What are your strengths? And then, as much as you possibly can, you should be aligning people and giving them the opportunity to play to their strengths as much as they can, giving them the tasks that they're going to be really good at so that they can feel like winners. Now, this can be really, really. Now, it doesn't mean that you're giving people things that they don't want to do or they're not good at. It's not that, because that cannot happen for everybody in an organization. But as much as you possibly can, you're giving people that opportunity to play to their strengths and to be doing things that they're good at. Now, if you do that, what you're going to get is you're going to get serious results, because you're straight away people are going to start feel like winners. Straight away, people are going to feel like the organization understands them and it's helping them to develop and do really well. And you're just going to get result after result after result. But where Grow Great Teams makes complete sense to me is this, and I can give you examples from rugby, but I'm going to give you an example from football, and that's the one I use in the book. So the current world champions for football, or in some parts of the world they call it soccer, is Argentina. Now, when they won the World Cup, they had this fabulous guy in goals, Martinez. Fabulous goalie, really good. He plays with Aston Villa at the moment. And then up front they had Messi, and obviously Messi is one of the greatest players of all time. And then there was 9 other people on the field. Now, Messi is brilliant at what he does as a winger and a striker, and Martinez is a brilliant goalie. Now, I could bet you that if you just swap those two players and you put Messi in goal and you put Martinez up front,
Yeah,
that Argentina would lose all their matches.
100%.
They would have been beat in the group stages of the World Cup, and they would never have gone on. And if you'd kind of put them as a combination, you said, right, just for argument's sake, let them play 20 games against good teams with Martinez up front and Messi in goals, they would lose everything. Now, what's fascinating is you've still got the same 11 players on the field. 9 of them, you still have them doing what they've always been doing. You've only switched two. And what you've done is you've switched them from playing to their strengths to playing to their weaknesses. And that whole team very quickly would start to feel negative, feel like losers. But why? Because the reality is it's the same 11 people, and all you've made is two changes. So there's something there about teams and organizations, companies, families recognizing who's got what strengths and putting them in the positions that makes best sense for them to be in, so that as a collective, as a team, you've got that best opportunity to win. And if you had your families, your communities, your companies, your countries thinking and operating in that way, we're going to achieve a whole lot more. We're going to achieve a lot of good, and we're going to increase happiness. And I mean, wouldn't that be great?
Yeah, definitely. And what's the advice on how can leaders use tools to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the team members or direct reports?
I mean, there's different. I think ultimately what it comes down to is it's about helping people to develop self awareness. And there's lots of, I mean, I mentioned some tools in the book, but people can Google or use Yahoo or whatever search engine they want to use to find whatever self awareness methodology that they want to use, whether that's 360 feedback or there's different personality type tools. I'm not going to promote any particular
Yeah.
one today, but that's the route. That's the route into it.
Yeah, makes sense. Amazing. Thank you, Keith. And now I can't wait to deep dive into our significant 60.
Yeah.
We have just chosen like 2 to 3 movies here to deep dive on this episode. But if our listeners want to know more about the significant 60, I'll link the Amazon link in the show notes so you can buy the book. So, first key theme that you talk about is authenticity. Is a thread that runs through several of the films you explore. So, what do you think makes it such a core trait of meaningful leadership? And you mentioned movies like The Truman Show, Legally Blonde, and Grease.
Yeah. So when I was writing the book, I wasn't going to use a definition of leadership at all because I just thought leave people be. They've got their own concepts and ideas around leadership, and I just thought, well, let them define it for themselves. But then I thought, well, I should put a couple in. So I put in one, and it was from a professor that was based at Harvard. He passed away a couple of years ago. Professor called Edgar Schein, and his definition was that when we are influential in shaping the behavior and values of others, we think of that as leadership. And I like that definition. And then I found another one, which was from McKinsey's, which is a management consulting company, a very large one. And their definition is that leadership is a set of mindsets and behaviors that aligns people in a collective direction, enables them to work together and accomplish shared goals, and helps them adjust to changing environments. So I like both of those. And when I was obviously reading loads of different books, some of which I mention in my own book, um, there was lots of different concepts around what are the building blocks for leadership. There was lots, and I started out and I looked at 160 movies, 150, and then I got it down to 60, and some of those movies aligned with the the different building blocks of leadership that lots of the academics have kind of spoken about, such as self-awareness, such as integrity, and another one of them is authenticity. And I think the movies that I kind of talk about to give examples of authenticity are The Truman Show, Erin Brockovich, Legally Blonde, Some Like It Hot, and Grease.
Grease, yeah.
And there's great examples in there of how some of these characters show their authenticity. But I think that why authenticity is so important in terms of leadership is that when you're in a relationship, whether it's a personal relationship or a professional relationship within an organization, trust is very important. Now, if you can't trust those around you, it makes it really, really difficult for you to lead others, but it also makes them very, very difficult for them to follow anybody because they just say, I can't trust these individuals. And one of the key ways of helping people to develop and build trust is through authenticity. So, a lot of the time, people have a good radar and a good visceral instincts about what different people are like. And if they don't think they can trust you, you cannot develop as a team. There cannot be leadership. And therefore, if there cannot be leadership, you cannot achieve the goals that are, as I kind of explained, set out by Shiner or McKenzie. So that's why authenticity is so vital, because if you're not turning up as an authentic leader, if you're not a straight person, if they don't kind of see that you are honest and of integrity and are authentic, they're not gonna trust you. They're not gonna feel safe around you, and therefore it's much harder for that team ethic. It's much harder for anybody to achieve the collective goals. And in my opinion, I think if there isn't any authenticity, if you're thinking about things like productivity, etc., etc., you're going to be way down. you're not going to be achieving at all. So I think authenticity is hugely important. It's important in organizations, it's important in companies, it's important in for us in terms of the leaders of our country. It's important for leadership within communities and leadership within families. It's huge.
Each of these films show authenticity tested in different ways. So, for example, in the Truman Show, Truman is trying to escape the fake world. In Legally Blonde, Elle stays true to herself despite the judgment. In Grease, Sandy changes to the gangster outfit to fit in. What does their journey teach us about leadership and being true to yourself?
I think what the Truman Show shows us, and there was Jim Carrey played the lead character there. I
Yeah.
think what that shows us is about it's about trusting your instincts because he started to recognize that things weren't quite right, and he started to recognize that everybody around him, apart from one person, which was a character played by the actress Natasha McElhonney, that everybody was faking faults. But he was very, very brave. That he kind of started to set little traps to catch people out so that he could kind of accurately deduce that actually he's correct, that he's just stuck in some fake place. But what was brave was then he knew he needed to get out of it, and they knew what his fears were, and they targeted his fears to stop him from leaving. But he was unbelievably brave, and he stuck to his guns, and he made it happen. So I think for the Truman Show, it's about that bravery and gut instinct. And I think with Erin Brockovich, and that's based on a true story. Julie Roberts was the actress, but it's based on a true story. And she was just amazing, really, how uh, she was working in a law firm, and she was a working class person that had a little bit of a chaotic lifestyle. And she was just trying to, you talk about raison d'etre, she was trying to make a better life for her kids. And she was doing her best there. And then she kind of came across that case where the water company were doing a dreadful thing. They had ended up poisoning, a whole community, and then denied it and tried to cover it up. And again, there was something about I suppose the Julia Roberts, Erin Brockovich there about the authenticity in terms of when she was in that professional legal firm, just turning up and being herself. And even though she was at a disadvantage by not complying with how the rest of them were in there in terms of trying to be, a form of pretentious professionalism, it was she was herself, but that fact that she was herself meant that when she was going around meeting all of the victims of the water company, they believed in her. They didn't believe in the other people that were in the company. They didn't believe in the lawyers. They believed in her. So they were able to connect with her as a person. And that was because they were able to see right through her and see that she was flawed, but that she was real and she was authentic and she could trust them. Um, and with Greece, it's a little bit more playful. I think what was playful there was about how both the John Travolta character and the what's her name? She passed away a couple of years ago. That plays Sandy. It'll come to me in a second. Anyway, the Danny and the Sandy characters, how they were both keen to be inauthentic and be somebody different, so that they'd be liked by the other. But even though they were kind of being artificial versions of each other to be liked by the other person, they didn't really need to, because actually what they were actually connecting to was not so they were sacrificing their identity to be liked by the other person without fully realizing that actually the other person liked them not for the pretend characterizations, but for who they genuinely were as people. And we saw that though from both characters in there, so that was interesting as well.
Yeah. And And according to you, what, in your experience, Leslie, what prevents leaders from being authentic? If it's such a core trait in leaders, there are still leaders that show being fake on social media or whatever. So, what prevents them from being authentic?
There's different things. I think you've got some leaders who fundamentally, at their heart, they're not good people. So they 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 can't be authentic. So what they really need to do is they need to revisit values and become better people. They know that they cannot be authentic because if they're authentic, then everyone's going to see them as the bad eggs that they actually are. So they have to keep up a pretense of niceness, shall we say. But in terms of what stops the genuinely good, decent people from turning up and being authentic in their organizations or within their leadership positions is, I guess it's fear. It's fear that they're within a culture or an organization um, that, that they cannot be themselves in. And I suppose we can kind of go back through history and that there's lots of people in history throughout a whole range of societies where it was very risky for them, even though they were genuinely good people, to be their authentic selves. And they may find themselves cast aside, they may have found themselves in prison, etc., etc. Well, that can be things in the past where in some countries it was, and it might be illegal today for some people to be gay. You had the McCarthyism that was a big issue in the USA, where a whole range of people were rounded up,
Hmm.
and for views that they didn't actually possess. So, so I think that there's a lot of fear, but I think in modern day, again, it's fear that within your organization that if you're authentic and you're not kind of fitting in, I think sometimes um, organizations are very homogenous, especially in the upper echelons. And if you do not kind of act and behave in that homogenous way, then you might not get the promotions or you might not. And the reality is, and it goes back to, when we were talking about the teams concept earlier, and when I was growing up and I was playing for all of these brilliant teams, what made us brilliant was all of us had different strengths, and it was about how we aligned those. And if I use the Argentina example, you would never play a football game with 11 goalies or 11 strikers because you would lose. But sometimes within organizations, the organizations kind of stick strictly to, oh, this is what a good leader looks like. It's only those types of people that behave in a very homogenized type of way get the opportunities. And so therefore, I guess some people have this fear that if they're their authentic self and their differences come out, that those differences may be held against them and they won't get the opportunities that they deserve. And I think sometimes what that comes down to as well is you think, well, why do the most senior people keep kind of hiring homogenous types of leaders? And I think what it boils down to is sometimes it's not that they're deliberately trying to be mean or bad or negative. I think what it's down to is that because through their eyes they feel very comfortable with a particular style of person or a particular type of person, and that person might be very similar to them. So they just think, "Oh my God, this person is really good," or they're very interesting," or "I like their views," or blah 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 blah. And it's because they feel very very comfortable with them, and it might be that that comfort is important to them because they themselves might feel, well, how are we going to achieve the organizational goals? We need to
Yeah.
appoint the best people. And for them, the best people are the people that they feel most comfortable with. So, so you've got an awful lot of that that goes on. I think the way around it is, again, it's not about doing this blame thing. It's about helping people to understand what might be happening. In the book, I call it mind the gap. I call it mind the gap, and that's another concept of mine. But I think there's, it's not about blaming people. It's about helping people to understand that this goes on, that sometimes it goes on with us, people understanding that it goes on. And we just need to encourage people to pick, a full team. Don't just pick the people that are the same as you. Pick people that are different to you.
Makes sense. And what would be like a practical example on like how does authenticity really look like in the workplace?
I think it looks like people turning up and being able to be themselves. Um, uh, it's about being open and transparent and genuine, and it's not about feeling that you have to pretend to be somebody else. But for some people, it's very hard to be authentic. And for some people, they've got good reason not to be. Their lived experience might be that they've missed out because the type of person that they are in terms of their transparency or their values aren't respected. But I think it's how you will see a really authentic organization or how you judge it from the outside is that you'll see lots of different types of people in there, and at all of the different levels, and that they're all comfortable in their own skin and they're all comfortable being themselves in that space, and that they don't have to pretend to be something that they're not.
Oh, I love that. Makes sense. And you also mentioned a lot about Erin Brockovich in the book, and you consider her, you have ranked her in your top 10 leaders. So, what really stands out to you most in Erin's leadership?
I think what Erin really impressed me with was it was about what she achieved. So she wasn't wanted in that legal firm, but she built a relationship and they started to value her for who she actually was and the fact that she wasn't a conformist. Um, but I think it was what her objective in terms of her desire to do good and to support the hundreds of families that had been poisoned by those toxic chemicals and uh, whose lives had been cut short or badly damaged, and how she was she went up against that giant corporation and she didn't give up, and she kind of knew what she was aiming for, and she knew the importance of winning this and the consequence of not winning this. And yeah, she's just that character, obviously, because I'm not talking about her in real life, I'm talking about the character. That character of Erin Brockovich in that film is just, yeah, she's in my top 10. I won't say where I ranked her, but she's up near the top. But
Yeah, I won't say it either.
yeah, she's phenomenal. Phenomenal.
Yeah. And like in the movie, Erin was up against a powerful company, systemic denial, and lack of legal support. And she was new to the law firm, if I'm not mistaken. And what keeps someone like this, like that, going? And what role does personal reason debtor play in perseverance?
I think raison d'etre for her was huge in terms of, I think her raison d'etre initially starting out was just to make a living for her kids. But
Yeah.
I think then when she saw what was happening to all of those families, her raison d'etre was connected to doing good for them and helping them. And I think that what she had was her integrity was huge. She had huge integrity and she had huge passion. So she had these brilliant leadership traits of passion, raison d'etre, integrity, and a never give up type of spirit. And I mean, could you imagine if you had, you know, if you had an Erin Brockovich type character in, I don't know, in the top positions of every company in the world, or in the top positions of every country in the world? It'd be like, whoa. It'd be serious. It'd be serious. We'd have one hell of a much better world, that's for sure.
Yeah, 100%. And one of Aaron's biggest strength was her ability to connect with people, like you mentioned, of being authentic. And also, do you think like empathy plays a role as well? So, how does empathy become a leadership advantage in situations like this?
I think empathy and emotional intelligence and compassion, those types of qualities are great because people see that you are interested in them and that you actually care. I think compassionate leadership is interesting in that it's about listening to what people are saying, understanding their situations, and then trying to help them find solutions. It's not about actually finding the solutions, just trying. I think that if you've got that ability from emotional intelligence perspective or empathy, you're able to build that connection. And if you're able to build that connection, it comes back to that whole concept of there's more likely to be trust, and there's more likely to be that whole relationship between leadership followership. It's very hard to have genuine leadership. A genuine leadership, in my opinion, is when there's followership. But if people can't trust you, or if they can't feel a connection with you in some way, then you cannot have that followership. And if there's no followership, you're not a leader. Simple
Makes
as that.
sense.
If you haven't got followership, if you cannot create followership, you are not a leader. You're just a leader in name only. And there's different ways. There's different ways of building that leadership style. I speak about it. There's a model in there called the real leadership model. But for any individual, that whole empathy point that you've made there, I think is a connecting factor. Yes.
Another interesting thing I'm going to ask you is about the growth of AI. And you
Yeah.
mentioned two movies on that. I think Terminator and Save Private Ryan.
Saving
Private Ryan.
Private Ryan. So Saving Private Ryan is in there as one of the movies, but I don't use that one for AI. But I'll explain where it connects in.
Yeah,
So Saving Private Ryan is there's three movies that I kind of say are my three on the podium that I think that there's very, very serious and brilliant lessons to be learned from. One of them is Erin Brockovich, one of them is The Godfather, and one of them is Saving Private Ryan. But when I talk about AI, I talk about there's films like Alien and there's films like The Terminator.
Terminator. Yeah.
But where they connect with Saving Private Ryan is that Saving Private Ryan, that film, it's about D-Day, and the Americans need to land in France as part of the Allied forces to defeat the Nazis. And in real life, the general that oversaw D-Day was Eisenhower, and General Eisenhower, and he went on to be a president of the United States. He was a two-time president of the United States, and I'm going to come back to him in a second. So I think AI, there's a great opportunity for AI to do lots of great things. I can see lots of positive advances in terms of how we can use it in healthcare and in a range of other ways. But um, AI could cause us a lot of problems too. And one of the places that it worries me is if you go back to Eisenhower, when he left office in January 1961, just like every president that leaves office, they do a live leaving office talk. And in his talk, one of the things he talks about is something that worries him. He said that before World War II, that there wasn't an armament industry in America, but for them to keep America safe in terms of fighting with Japan and then the Nazis, um, they had to put a lot of focus into building arms. And his big concern was that when he was leaving office in 1960, on January 61, and he put it in his speech, was that he was worried about the power and the might of what he described as the military industrial complex. And his fear was that it had become really, really powerful and that um, it had now was a huge component of the national GDP. It might have been at that time creating more of the GDP than any of the other industries. Had representatives and advocates for it in every community, and that there was millions and millions of people that were employed and relying on it. So I suppose I worry about that he was saying that about the power of the military industrial complex, or in the modern day, we call it the defense industry. Um, and when I combine that with, I can't remember his name now, the professor of AI, who
Godfather.
the godfather of AI, he kind of resigned from his post because he wanted to warn us about how powerful AI could be. And I suppose when I combine what Eisenhower was saying in 1961, and I think about the world today and the power and the might of the defense industry, And I think about what that Godfather AI was saying in terms of the people that are committing the most amount of time and money to the development of AI is the military industrial complex or the defense industries. That kind of worries me, that it's a very negative way to be thinking about AI and adapting it. And it makes me think about the lessons that James Cameron and all of those were trying to teach us through Terminator. And it's kind of like you kind of think, oh my God, that movie was kind of saying, look, this could be the future. And I suppose one of the things I worry about is, again, Eisenhower. This is a general. This is a general of a victorious global army that's warning us in 1961 about the power of the military industrial complex. And it's like, where are we today in 2025? And how is that industry influencing the world? And how is it using AI? And what could happen next? I don't know. I don't know.
Quite a fascinating perspective, Keith. And final question before we wrap up. So, if our listeners remember just one idea from today's conversation about leadership, impact, or doing good, what would you want that to be?
So I suppose what I want people to zone in on is that individually, um, there's 7 billion people in the world, and we're all one of those. And we've got more power than you think. And, what we all have as power is the power of us as an individual to do good. And we should focus in on doing good. And what we're responsible is for us as individuals. We're responsible for how we behave. So I would encourage people to behave well in your lives, to do good, to just do good. And that as more and more and more and more of us do that, maybe it's possible for all 7 billion of us to do that, that then the world becomes, a much better place, a happier place, a good place. But what I would like people to remember from this is something in addition to that, which is I'd like to quote a fellow Irishman called John Hume. Now, he passed away a little while ago. I think he passed away in 2020. And he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1998. I think he won it that year with David Trimble. But I'm just talking about John Hume today, because what John Hume said is that difference is the essence of humanity, and that difference is an accident by birth, and it should never be the source of hatred or conflict, and that the answer to difference is to respect it, and that therein lies a most fundamental principle of peace, which is a respect for diversity. And I think his points are correct, is that we are all born where and how we are born by accident. He's dead right. And therefore, just because I'm different to you, Sid, or anybody else, shouldn't be a reason or a factor for me to have anxiety or fear or a dislike or a hatred for you. I should be just accepting that we're different, and that that's a good thing. And that and I think that that's what it's about. We need to, the ultimate act of doing good is having respect for others and behaving in a peaceful way. And yeah, we need peace. We certainly need peace today as much as we've needed it at any time in history. And we just need to respect difference.
I love that. Thank you so much, Keith. It was so amazing to talk to you. And for our listeners, just do one good thing today and keep doing it and
Yeah,
just
yeah,
multiply.
yeah.
And yeah, definitely.
But thanks very much, Sid. It's been a pleasure to speak with you today.
Yeah, likewise. And for our listeners, I will link Keith's social media and the book's link in the show notes. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, make sure to comment below what's your biggest key takeaway from this episode. Thank you once again to our listeners, and thank you once again, Keith. It was amazing to talk to you today.
Thank you very much. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.